Welcome to the 2024 Valley Water Landscape Summit. It's a pleasure to have all of you here with us this morning, in person and virtually. My name is Shelkie Tao. I'm the Valley Water Landscape Committee Chair, and I will be your moderator for this event. I'm the founder and designer of Water Efficient Gardens, an online landscape design business that focuses on low water and native gardens. Prior to Water Efficient Gardens, I have been worked in the high-tech industry in the Valley for over 10 years. I received my certificate of achievement in environmental horticulture from Foothill College and the MBA from the Anderson School at UCLA. The Landscape Summit is an annual event hosted by Valley Water to bring together the landscape community to learn about water issues in the county and California as a whole, and how water relates to the landscaping industry. Before we begin, I would like to go over some Zoom logistics for those who are joining us virtually. If you have questions for the speakers, please type your questions into the Q&A box by clicking on the Q&A icon in the bottom middle of your Zoom window. For general comments, please use the checkbox. If you need to adjust your audio settings, please click the audio settings on the bottom left. If you need to leave the webinar for any reason, click the leave button on the bottom right. For those joining us in person, please raise your hand during the Q&A portion of each section if you have a question. For in-person attendees, here are some housekeeping rules, details, and other notes. If you need to use the restroom, please follow the signs outside the boardroom to find the restrooms. Remember to stop by the various tables on the side of the boardroom to learn about interesting information and resources from local organizations in our community. For professionals who need continuing education units, the Landscape Summit may also qualify as CEUs. Please contact your certifying organization directly for more information. For in-person attendees, make sure you checked in at the registration table. For Zoom attendees, please make sure that you are logged on Zoom with your full name for tracking purposes. Now, let's take a look at the agenda for this year's Landscape Summit. This year's theme is A Changing Landscape. First, Valley Water staff will provide an update on the state of the Valley's water and an overview of Valley Water's programs. Next, we have a panel section about native plants. Afterwards, we'll take a 15-minute break. After the break, we'll jump into another panel, this time about another panel section, this time about non-functional turf. We'll then wrap up with a presentation about climate-ready trees. Okay, now let's move on and welcome Vice Chair Richard Santos to the stage. Oh, one more.
My notes.
Oh. Oh, here.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelkie. Appreciate that. New member, she's already chair. Very good. Anyway, I'm Richard Santos, the vice chair of Santa Clara Valley Water District, and I welcome everybody here to our 9th annual. And as I was talking to friends out here, this is getting better and better. And so before we get started, I would definitely like to recognize Ashley, Shannon, and her staff. Are you here? Please stand up, everybody, because puts us together. It takes a lot of work. They do work, and all our volunteers, we really appreciate it. And what makes me feel good in talking to our chair is that the education is getting out there. And that's obviously the water conservation programs are working. Really appreciate that. Before we say a few more things, I want to introduce a few folks out here in the audience. First of all, Brian Boyer is our former chair for about, what, 4 or 5 years. Brian, are you here? Stand up, please, Brian. Thank you. We have our chair here, Shua. And Chair Shua and myself are the liaison to the landscaping committee. We really support it. We really enjoy it in the monthly meetings or whatever they want to do. We always include them in the budget. So with that, I would like to, the idea behind the summit is to get input and ideas from you, the landscaping professional community, and how to work together to make conservation a California way of life. Because you're in the field, working with the public, your ideas are so valuable to us. A good example, how important this collaboration is to Valley Water is how Santa Clara County is working to meet water demands during the drought and how residents continue to save water and have water conservation as California's way of life. I can remind you, after every time we have storms comes a 4 or 5 year drought. So this is so important. Right now we have water. It's coming down, but it follows by a drought, so we have to be prepared. Landscaping committee, community played a key role in this year, and the efforts are very much appreciated. In this committee it's a great group, a lot of professionals, does a great job. We are very excited about this landscaping summit because we have some wonderful speakers coming up who will help provide you with the tools you need to make Santa Clara County a leader in sustainable water efficient landscaping. On behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Board of Directors, we all appreciate you coming and we thank you. Now, with your permission, I'd like to take a little time to recognize one of our members who got ill here for a while back, but when I came on 23 years ago, he was here. He become a good friend, a good source. We've done many work together. We take his advice seriously. We're really honored that he comes here today so we can honor him. Ron Kanemoto, would you come up, please? Oh, my friend.
I was surprised, but sure.
We lost track for a while and I had Ashley go out and contact him, and he called and we chatted, and it was great to come back today. And the good news is he says he wants to stay, and that's what I call a great volunteer, 23 years. So I know you don't want to speak, but I want to say a few words, but this plaque is especially from Chair Shua and myself, recognizing, and Chair Shua come up, recognizing your volunteer work and your advice and professional work as in nurseries and water conservation. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good. Say a few words.
Wow, they just asked me to come. I didn't realize I was getting this. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think I have a quick comment, and that is one thing I've always been impressed about the Santa Clara Valley Water District is the people I have met, especially the directors and things. They are very conscientious and are very hardworking in trying to help us preserve our water. I've always been impressed with that. And I know sometimes their PO department could do better, but on some things. But the people I've met, they have always been dedicated and conscientious and trying their damnedest, their hardest to help conserve water or manage our water. So that's, to me, very impressive, and that's why I've always tried to be here. My other thing is, a quick comment was, in looking at our water and the weather, it is really obvious. This is not the weather that I grew up in. And the way the current weather and the rain, and then it's sunny the next day, that's not our weather. And yet that's what we're having. So one of the things I was against and now in favor of, and it shows the long distance thinking, Director Santos has been pushing for another reservoir. And we don't need another reservoir. The way the water is coming down and the way the water doesn't come down when we have a drought year tells me we need more water and we need to be able to store it more. And yes, I know it isn't cost effective, but we need the source of water if we are going to do well in our valley. So however the director has found out and why he's promoting it, I say he's right, because you can tell, obviously, the way our weather is going, water is going to be a continued issue in our valley. I can't tell you how important that's going to be for us. So my quick comment anyway. Thank you very much. This was not expected, but it was a huge surprise. So thank you. Thank you.
Now, before we have Director Jim Bell on the virtual. So Jim, welcome. Good morning to you. And to all you folks here again, I know you're all busy and hardworking. I really appreciate you taking the time. You know, water shortage and so on is going to be here for the rest of our lives. And then we're going to have 10 to 20-year droughts predicted by Stanford scientific papers, NASA papers. It's all there, but we can do a good job. The challenges are there and we're up for it. Again, thank you for coming. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Santos, for the warm welcome. And thank you to Mr. Ronald Kanemoto for all of your contributions to Valley Water and to the Landscape Committee. Up next, we have Kirsten Struve, who will talk about the state of the Valley's water. Kirsten Struve has over 30 years of experience leading water resource management programs. She is currently the Assistant Officer for the Water Supply Division at the Santa Clara Valley Water District, leading water conservation, purified and recycled water program, drought response, and water supply planning. Prior to joining Valley Water, Kirsten worked for the cities of Palo Alto and San Jose. Kirsten has a BA in biology from Knox College and a master's in environmental management from Yale University. Kirsten, the stage is all yours.
Thanks so much, Shelkie. Are you gonna pull up the presentation? Oh, it's there. Hi. Well, welcome and thank you all for being here today. I'll be discussing the state of Santa Clara County's water supply. So the drought period of 2020 to 2022 was the driest 30-year period on record, breaking the old record set by the previous drought from 2013 to 2015. Our drought status was severe and the state's snowpack, which is the source of our county's imported water, had dwindled to nearly nothing. In response to the drought, Valley Water's Board of Directors declared a water shortage emergency condition in June 21 and called for everyone in our county to use 15% less water than was used in 2019. Valley Water's board also took the unprecedented step to approve an enforcement ordinance related to outdoor watering restrictions in 2022. And then when the state took further action to ban the irrigation of non-functional turf on commercial, industrial, and institutional properties in September 22, Valley Water followed suit by including it in our enforcement ordinance as well. And then in the winter of 22 and 23, the state received record rainfall, moving us quickly out of the drought status. And as a result, the board rescinded the water shortage emergency condition. But because we know that water supplies will continue to be impacted, the board adopted a water conservation as a way of life resolution and permanent enforcement ordinance that can work during both drought and non-drought times. Our board's actions during the drought were very successful, and we saw a lot of great milestones during that drought. We saw a tremendous increase in our conservation program participation, and this increased participation really helped move us towards our long-term goals. We have doubled our staffing and increased dollars to go towards 22 water conservation programs. And we've hit some impressive milestones like converting 1 million square feet of lawn to water efficient landscapes through our rebate program in just 1 year, and 3.5 million square feet in the drought total. And we've been able to reduce water use by 25% in the last 5 years, even though population has grown. The state water use efficiency legislation was passed shortly after the last drought in 2018. It establishes service area-wide urban water use objectives for water retailers to comply with. And these urban water use objectives collectively total up to a water budget for an entire water retailer service area. So for example, a water retailer may exceed its indoor residential requirement if all the remaining outdoor and CII requirements total to less than their total water budget. And in order for water retailers to comply successfully, Valley Water's programs will play a key role, as will you all participating in our programs. Our landscape rebate program, sub-meter rebate program, and large landscape program directly support elements of the regulatory framework that is now being developed. So how are we doing now? So record rainfall in December 22 and January 23 brought much needed water to our county and as out of drought condition. At the beginning of this winter, it looked like it might be dry again. We had what was called a snow drought. But with the more recent storms, we are near average. And as you can see, most of our state is no longer in drought with this current US Drought Monitor map. But as Director Santos said, droughts are a recurring feature of California's climate, and global warming is making them worse. We're seeing longer periods of low precipitation paired with record high temperatures. And these wild swings between incredible drought and unprecedented rainfall are expected to continue and worsen in the years ahead. This is a great graphic showing the many impacts climate change will have or already has. Many of these will impact Valley Water's mission to providing healthy creeks and ecosystems, safe, clean water, and flood protection. We have a climate change action plan, which is our guide to addressing climate change in our mission areas of water supply, flood protection, and ecosystem stewardship. And that plan builds upon Valley Water's existing climate change efforts, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions and a commitment to carbon neutrality, and adapting our operations to climate change. Climate change is also included in all of our other planning efforts, like our water supply master plan and our One Water plan. And we continue to track statewide and local impacts, science and policy, and work with state experts. Here's a breakdown of our water supply, and a diverse portfolio will help us build resilience. So 30% of our water supply comes from local sources, such as the local rain captured in our reservoirs and groundwater. 50% of our water supply is imported from outside the county. We do count water conservation as 15% because every drop we save is one that we don't have to import or use now. And then 5% of our water supply is water reuse. All of it is non-potable at this point, but our board has a goal to reach 10% of our water supply portfolio. And we are pursuing potable reuse, which I'll talk about a little later. We get many questions about the impacts of growth. While population has increased, our water demands have actually gone down, and our population is actually very efficient compared to other counties in California. Our current water supplies are at healthy levels. As I mentioned, imported water is half of our countywide supply. And last year, we received 100% allocations for all of our imported water contracts. The end of 2024 groundwater levels are projected to be at the normal stage. And our local reservoir storage is at 101% of restricted capacity. We do have seismic restrictions on some of our reservoirs, and Anderson is drained, which we'll talk about more here. So this makes us very vulnerable to drought right now because we cannot locally store water in our largest reservoir, Anderson. That's due to an order to drain it for public health and safety reasons. Normally, this reservoir has the ability to store more than all of Valley Water's other reservoirs combined. And so our local storage levels will be below average since we cannot use Anderson until the seismic retrofit project that we're working on is complete. As I mentioned, we are working on a long-term locally controlled drought-proof solution, which is purified water. It is basically taking treated wastewater and purifying it and adding it to our water supply. We are already purifying water and have that experience at our Advanced Water Purification Center in Alviso, and we encourage anyone who's interested to go on a tour. And we're now working on a project with the cities of San Jose and Santa Clara for a potable reuse project at this site. What this purification center does right now is just enhance the non-potable recycled water that you might see in parks and other large landscapes. So how do we use water in our county? More than half of our water is used by residences, including for their landscaping. And then of those residences, half use it outdoors. And that's why replacing lawns with water efficient landscaping is so important. Businesses use about 30% in our county, and we also have programs to assist with water efficient technologies for them. Though the drought is over, we still continue to encourage making water conservation a way of life. California, as I said, is prone to droughts, and climate change will make that worse. We have very aggressive long-term water conservation targets and are on track to achieve them. And thanks to the landscape community for considering water conservation as part of all your efforts, whether or not we are in a drought. And to have behavior change happen with your customers and residents and commercial properties, we have an extensive public outreach campaign to promote water conservation as a way of life. And we talk about our rebate program, our surveys, the gray water rebate, and we have very specific CII outreach as well. And increased participation in our programs helps us reach our local conservation goals as well as meeting the state's requirements. And with that, I'm open for any questions.
Hi, my name's Loren Brown. I'm with Our City Forest. 10% of the water supply comes from recycled water, is that correct?
Not yet, 5% at this time.
5%. So this process to recycle the water, and is it replacing groundwater supplies or going back into the regular supply?
So right now, the non-potable is just used directly for industrial purposes and landscaping in what we, purple pipes. So if you see a purple hydrant in a park, that's probably then watered with recycled water. What we're trying to do is clean it further so that it can be used in the potable supply. There are different ways to do that: indirect by putting it in the groundwater, like you said, or direct. Now the direct potable reuse regulations are going to be approved by the state a bit later this spring. So we are pursuing something that is a direct potable reuse project where it would go into our raw water to our treatment plants and then just be mixed with all the other water.
That's fantastic news. I'm keenly interested in knowing what your short and long-term goals around that are, precisely because as the population grows in the valley, our need for water grows. And in terms of the groundwater issues, as a species, we can always recycle our own wastewater. But as we remove the groundwater, we can desertify the entire valley and kill off the trees, our heritage trees. So I'd love to find out more about the short and long-term goals with regards to the reuse of water. The other thing is the gray water program around residential use. I'd like to find out what percentage of residences actually take advantage of the gray water conversion program and what the short and long-term plan is for how to move that forward and increase that. Is that a kind of question you could answer for me?
Well, I think Ashley would be better at answering that particular question.
Yes, thank you. Right now, we are trying to encourage more participation in our gray water rebate program. It's becoming more popular, but we don't have a lot of residents taking advantage of it yet. So we are increasing outreach for that program. Our marketing campaign this year will include gray water as well, which we haven't in the past. And from surveys, we've seen that surveys of people in the county, we've seen that there's an increased interest in gray water. So we're hoping to see an uptick in that program. Yeah, I mean, we get less than 20 rebates per year. So it's a, very small percentage of our county. So it's a huge potential, but again, we're kind of increasing that participation.
So we are actually updating our water supply master plan right now, and our previous water supply master plan had a goal of 24,000 acre feet per year of potable reuse, and we're reviewing that with our committee as to what the goal should be for this round of updates. We only have about 3 minutes left, so maybe some other questions.
Yes, the state at one point had some guidelines for a number of gallons per person per day. And they had set some future guideline, a date when that was supposed to be taking effect. And can you give me some idea of what Valley Water is doing or what the state is doing regarding that? And if so, how are you going to enforce it or even provide information to the residents as to how much water they're using or not using?
I think that's in a later presentation, isn't it, Ashley? Oh, okay. Well, I don't have all the details, but as a whole, our county does meet those GPCD requirements already because we're quite efficient. And we are supporting our retailers. We ourselves are not going to be enforcing the GPCD. That's the retailers having to meet those numbers. But our programs will be very key to help them do that.
Do we have time for one quick question?
I'm just wondering if you have any statistics on enforcement for landscape. You said enforcement is part of what's been done, and I, in my experience, don't see any changes in wasteful users.
Good question. So during the last drought, we had, we still have our permanent water waste program. So we rely on members of the public to basically call or message in, and then we follow up, or the retailers follow up. We have a procedure to work with our retailers, and usually after the first complaint and us notifying the homeowner of the waste, we don't get a second complaint for that same property. If we do, then we escalate our enforcement, but we haven't had to issue any fines. So we think our program is quite successful, and we continue to advertise the water waste number. We're not driving around finding waste, but because that would be a big resource drain for us, but we are relying on people to call it in. So if you see a lot, maybe you could call it in. I think we're done. Thank you.
Up next, we have Ashley Shannon, who will present on Valley Water's program updates and accomplishments. Ashley Shannon joined Valley Water's Water Supply Planning and Conservation Unit over 10 years ago and works with the team to provide water conservation rebates, programs, and education to Santa Clara County residents and businesses. She runs Valley Water's landscape rebate program and agricultural mobile irrigation lab, as well as other programs. An avid gardener and retired landscape designer herself, Ashley has an AS in landscape horticulture from Cabrillo College and a BS in environmental studies from San Jose State University, and enjoys sharing her knowledge with others. Ashley, would you please come up to the front?
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to see a packed room here. This summit's getting more and more popular every year. So thank you for your commitment to this. We do rely heavily on the landscape industry to be kind of our voices to the public. You all are the ones that are interacting with your clients day to day. And so, you know, we really appreciate you all being here and taking time to learn about our programs and these conservation measures. So today I'm going to talk about just briefly, you know, kind of go over which programs we do have. That'll be pretty quick. And then I just want to let you all know the different accomplishments that we have we've been able to achieve since our last landscape summit. So kind of going back through 2023 to show you all kind of what we've been doing and some new things that you may not know about. So we offer our whole water conservation program is aimed at encouraging our residents, businesses, institutions, et cetera, to conserve water and to make water conservation a way of life. Our programs are starting to lean heavily on the landscape sector because that's where we're going to see our biggest savings. So I'm not going to go through all these programs. I know there's a lot on there, but the ones that I have in bold are related to landscaping. So you can kind of take some extra focus on those, but we offer you know, both rebates, programs and services, and outreach and education. So we're trying to hit it from all sectors. So our rebate programs include our landscape rebate program, which is kind of multifaceted. We have lawn conversion, irrigation equipment upgrades, rainwater capture, all a part of that. We recently added a landscape design assistance program, which I'll go over later in this. And then we have our gray water laundry to landscape rebate program that's for our residential customers. As far as the programs and services go for landscape, we do have a large landscape survey program where we'll go out to large commercial sites and we provide water budgeting through that program as well. Our Waterways Outdoor Survey program will send an irrigation professional to someone's home and go through their entire irrigation system with them and look at their irrigation scheduling and kind of note inefficiencies and where they can improve. And that's a free program in our area. And then we also do water waste enforcement. So we do have a email, phone number, and also our Access Valley Water app that I recommend, you know, putting on your phone. So if you're out on an early morning jog or driving around, you can snap a photo of, you know, a geyser or sprinkler, and we will reach out and to those sites. And then we also offer educational programs. So things like this, our Landscape Summit, and then we do professional training, some of which I'll go over a little bit later. But watersavings.org, which I'll mention multiple times through this, is kind of our homepage, and everything that you need water conservation related will be on there. So our landscape rebate program, as Kirsten mentioned, you know, during the drought, we saw a huge spike in participation, which, you know, which is wonderful. We do expect that. In 2023, calendar year 2023, we converted over 1.7 million square feet of lawn area. Our rebate program, the rate for that was $1 per square foot. In 2021, we increased that to $2 per square foot. We are continuing with that rate through this fiscal year, and we will continue through next fiscal year until funding runs out for that. So we do, you know, expect to kind of go through that again. Since the start of our landscape rebate program, which is kind of all the way back in 2006, we've converted over almost 16.5 million square feet of lawn area. So that's a huge savings. But the last couple of years have been significant because we actually saw a pretty big shift in the participation from our commercial sites. So we saw increase from all sectors in relation to the drought. But our commercial, institutional, multifamily used to make up about 5% of our applications and 25% of the lawn area converted. In the last 2 years, that shifted to 10% of our applications and almost 44% of the lawn area converted. So I do kind of expect to see that trend continuing, and we'll talk about our non-functional turf irrigation ban later, you know, which is continuing to this, but this program continues to be a success. We do see numbers, application rates going down a bit after 2022. That is normal for us. We do see a spike when we are, you know, dead in the middle of a drought, but our numbers remain higher than pre-drought years, and likely will continue at that number. So we're still there. We're still, you know, encouraging everyone to participate. So since our last summit, we offered a number of workshops and educational series to help, again, educate the public. So we finished up in fiscal year 2023, our Lawn Busters workshops. We did a hands-on permaculture skills training, which I'll discuss a little bit more on our next slide. And we also offered qualified water efficient landscaper trainings. We will continue to offer those. So in the last year, we did 2 trainings in English and 2 trainings in Spanish for those. And I believe we had, let's see, over 47 students in that time period. And then we continue to offer a webinar series, which is aimed at the public, all things landscape related, gray water, design, etc. Those still live on our YouTube channel and continue to be a resource for people. I think we've had over 4,000 views on our YouTube channel, and they're kind of available at all times. We are looking to continue with those. We actually have a request for proposal out right now to extend those. All right. The permaculture skills training, we partnered up with Smart Yards Education and Vital Cycle. Smart Yards Education has a table outside to offer a water resource management and conservation techniques using permaculture principles. So this was an hands-on training on site. It was 4 weekends throughout 4 months. They worked on a few different conversion projects at actual homes and installed, rainwater capture systems, gray water, and landscape conversion. And it was also a bilingual training. And so this, we had 17 students and community members from this, many of which who this piqued their interest and are continuing in this permaculture route. And keep an eye out. There should be another training in the fall for this program as well. A lot of the public, doesn't really understand the plethora of programs and services that we offer. So last year we worked with our very talented graphics team to create this water conservation infographic, and it lives on our website at watersavings.org. And really, it just highlights all the many different things that a single homeowner can take advantage of that we offer. So from indoor, free shower heads and sink aerators to, online educational information, and then moving into the outdoor sector, everything landscape rebate program related. So we've got, rain gardens, cisterns, rain barrels, all the different rebate programs in our landscape survey. And so it's just a kind of an easy way for customers to kind of visualize what is available to them through our rebate program. So I encourage you to check that out or share it with customers to kind of help them get an idea of the kind of the scope that they can do with us. All right. The one thing I'm very excited about is that we recently launched, recently meaning probably almost exactly 30 days ago, our landscape design assistance program. This has been something we have been trying to launch for several years and have hit several roadblocks. But we designed the program after a program developed by City of Contra Costa, which was also developed by City of Sacramento and then East Bay Utilities District. It's been a very popular program. And with this program, we understand that getting started on projects can be the biggest barrier to customers who don't even, they don't know anything about plants. They don't know where to start. And so we offer this program in partnership with a number of different designers and architects in our area. We have about 13 on our list right now, and we are always looking to increase that. So I encourage you all to look into it and get on our list. But it's a 1 to 2 hour on-site consultation. This isn't providing the sites with a drawn plan or a detailed plant list, anything that would be involved in a full landscape design. But it's, to answer questions, to talk with customers, kind of address some of their concerns and point them in the right direction so that they can install good gardens. We want these gardens to last and to look good. And then also the $200 fee for this program that they pay directly to the designers is rebatable when they complete their landscape conversion project. So we are really excited to see how this program evolves. And we've been getting some good feedback from our designers so far. So if you're interested, let us know. As Kirsten mentioned, we had our water waste ordinance. So in the last year, this became permanent, and there's certain water restrictions. Now, most of these, for those of you who work in the industry, these are general, these are best management practices that, really are for us, no brainers, but for the public, we've got these in place. And so this includes, limiting irrigation to periods where, not the hottest parts of the day. So restricting irrigation between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. It's prohibiting, any irrigation that results in runoff or broken sprinklers, et cetera. Irrigating within 48 hours of a rainfall. So I'm sure you've all been driving around and seen sprinklers going while we're getting heavy rain. And then lastly, replacing broken or defective equipment that is resulting in water losses. So all these are part of our prohibitions. And then we've also included our the non-functional irrigation turf ban, which we will go over in detail in a later one. But as I mentioned, we do have an app and a phone number and an email for reporting this waste. And really our goal with this is education and to encourage sites. A lot of these sites don't even know that they're having an issue. So we're kind of out there helping. And then lastly, we've had an extensive outreach campaign, putting out our message that water conservation is a way of life. So we do, we do want people to conserve during a drought, but really our programs are aimed at long-term water savings. So, converting a lawn saves water during the drought, but it's also going to continue to save water for, decades later. So we have an extensive outreach campaign that you all may have seen. Included with that, as part of our campaign, we promoted our landscape transformations and irrigation rebates. So we've got ads that are directed specifically at landscape conversion. We have one that's for our waterwise outdoor survey program and our irrigation equipment upgrades. We had about almost 600,000 visits to our landscape rebate pages as a result of the ads. Almost 120,000 clicks on our sprinklers and irrigation, and a little over 80,000 for our waterwise outdoor survey program. So we're getting, we'll continue to market these. Our spring campaign will be starting in April. And then we also continue with our landscape transformation stories. So we have partnered with the California Native Plant Society with a Growing Native Gardens tour, and we produced a series of short clips interviewing folks who have either gone through our program and converted to California native plants, or have done this on their own for years. So we've got, they're really great, very well produced. I highly recommend kind of looking into those. And we do have a Growing Native Garden tour table outside. If you're not familiar with that tour and that program, I encourage you to go talk with them because it's a great program. And again, we'll continue our outreach to businesses. We did a lot of direct outreach to our businesses this past year, and we will continue with that. We want to participation from the landscape the commercial sector, especially with the landscape, as you saw, has a huge impact on our programs. And so there's a great opportunity with that. So we'll continue. So we sent out emails, mailers, postcards, et cetera, to different businesses in our county. And lastly, we do have a bunch of resources on our website. I encourage you all to kind of memorize watersavings.org. It's kind of, everything that we do. We also help run a website called southbaygreengardens.org with several other agencies in our county for more information for our customers. So, and with that, I am available for some questions. Yes, all these slides will be available. I see a lot of people clicking pictures and stuff, but these are all posted on our website. So all past summits are on our website. And so it'll be, all this will be posted for you. I think we have a question over here.
Good morning. Katie from K&D Landscaping, and I live over in the Bay Area, Monterey Bay area. And what we're seeing with a lot of the water districts on that side of the hill is they're kind of dissolving their water conservation programs and staffing. Just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on Valley Water and that the direction of the conservation department and your commitment to it.
Yeah. Ours is probably heading in the opposite direction. So, we really do see these programs as, an asset and, needed to reach our water conservation goals. As I mentioned, our programs were very heavy on the indoor sector when we first started for quite a while, but toilet rebates, washers, that's kind of the low hanging fruit. We don't see as much availability there, but we are moving into the irrigation sector because there is huge opportunity. About half the water that we use in the landscape is wasted. And so, yes, we are continuing with those programs. Any other questions? Oh, we got one.
You mentioned $200 rebate for the new program for
Yes.
the design. That seems like a small amount compared, I mean, how much are you estimating that the overall, your average cost for a design would be?
Yes. So to clarify, this is just a 1 to 2 hour on-site consultation. It is not followed up with a drawn out plan. We don't have the designers sending out follow-up emails, correspondence. We are pretty clear with the customers that it's a time for them to talk with the designers while they are on site. So we do, we've had several conversations with the designers. We want to make sure that we're not undercutting any sales, any prices like that. But this is, purely kind of a verbal on-site consultation. They may be provided with a few specific plant names for the site, but it's an opportunity to ask questions. So it's in no way a full landscape design. Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Next up, we have a series of panel presentations followed by a Q&A section. Since we have multiple speakers, I will let them tell you all about themselves when it's their turn to speak. Rebecca, Rachel, Dan, and Rhonda, would you please join me at the front? Rebecca, you will present first.
Will it go into my, oh, there, sorry. All right. Thank you. Okay. I'm Rebecca Shoenenberger. I'm a landscaper and I'm also a master gardener since 2011. I went to San Jose State for environmental studies and park management at West Valley before that. And our company slogan is Restoring California 1 Yard at a Time. So my main goal is to help people create habitat and do that in an aesthetic way. And, a lot of people think native gardens are no maintenance and no water. It can be that, but sometimes that isn't the most appealing thing to encourage other people to go native. So, it's kind of a balance of creating habitat, but also creating something that's pretty and going to encourage other people to want to do more native planting. Some of the main things that we do, like the water district rebate, is encouraging people to percolate water, restore and create habitat. A lot of people are very specific into butterflies, a certain type of butterfly, bee habitat, bird habitat. I've had people that want to create lizard habitats. So, you can create habitat for pretty much everything. And that's what I think we all should be doing with our gardens. If we just let nature take its course, it's going to come back. I think of the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And then also just in my designs, I always want everything to have form and function. It should be pretty, but it should be useful. This client in particular requested a boardwalk, which was a great idea. I never thought of that. And so a lot of ideas come to me from the client and it looks really cool. I love the way it turned out. But that I totally have to credit to the client requesting that. And then on the bottom corner here, it connects with the DG pathway. So It's a combination of many different things. And then you have the arroyo in the middle, or more like a lago, kind of little dry creek lake that does collect from all the downspouts, and it will have standing water when it's pouring, and then it all soaks down eventually. So form and function. This is a master gardener garden that I designed and have managed on and off throughout the years. And this is at the county offices at Burger Drive. If anybody's familiar, it's where the master gardener's offices are, and vector control and all UC stuff at the county office there. So this originally, you can see on the top, was just a little useless piece of grass. No offense to anybody, but it was just like grass on a hill that nobody could really sit on and didn't really do any good for anybody. So we took advantage of the rebate years ago and created this, created the plan to take out the lawn. And this might have been when the rebate was still $1. This was 2013, so it's been a long time. And below, the bottom picture is what it looks like now, or last spring. Okay. They asked me to come and talk about design and my ideas about that. And so one of the main things I've learned is about spacing. And I'm not a professional designer. I didn't go to school to be a designer. I went to school to be a park ranger. So I kind of ended up here. And I try to learn from experience, learn from what I see in nature, and also learn from what I see in managing the garden. So I think anybody that's had the perspective of doing maintenance knows when you've seen a designer create a design where this is all way too close and you have to prune it all the time. So the idea of space things, so it is sustainable, that you don't have to have maintenance constantly, and that it is what's appropriate for that plant. You're not fighting it. You're giving it room to grow. I think of, like when your belt's too tight around your waist, you got to get another pair of pants. So, give it the room it needs to grow. And from the two pictures, that was probably a year or two after it was new. So maybe 2014 on the top. And then fairly current on the bottom, maybe 2 years ago. And again, just more before and after pictures of the difference of having the space and, the right next to the path. I don't know, is there a pointer? Only some of you will see it. So like that's a hummingbird fuchsia right there. And so that is been given enough space to run, because hummingbird fuchsia likes to run. So give those certain plants the space to go, and it's the right plant in the right place. And again, another hummingbird fuchsia here. Behind it was a manzanita shrub, and look at the manzanita now. Same here with the redbud. Everything looks super sparse, and that's what people, a lot of people design for instant gratification. And this is where I'm designing for the 5 to 10 year plan of this garden becoming more established and filling out, rather than just the instant gratification is, that's our human nature, how society is. So plants shouldn't be that way, in my opinion. But a lot of times people are shocked when there's a new garden and it's mostly mulch and barely any plants. They're like, you planted me a mulch garden. Well, give it time. Here's another example, not technically a native, kind of a cultivar, GMO, whatever you want to call it. This is Carapia, and this is 3 months grown in the middle of summer. So this stuff is an amazing lawn alternative. It grows super fast. Once it fills in, all you have to do is edge it. Yeah, so that's a really cool alternative. And also the native equivalent of this is Phyla or Lipia. And that is, it will equally give you the same kind of coverage, but it will take a lot longer. The Carapia is like that, which it's what it's engineered to do. Here's an example of a native garden, a lawn replacement. and native plants, still with room to grow. I think this garden is maybe 2 years old now, and the client even asks us to prune things down even more. So some people like a little space of separation of plants. Some people want more natural. So that's, again, we're listening to your client, and or you researching the plants and seeing how big it really grows and thinking about it realistically. That said, you could read 10 different plant guidebooks and they might all have different ranges of what the plants might be. And then you look on Cowscape and it's another different range. So that's where kind of having some of that experience, or I like to go hiking as an excuse to study the plants. So, you know, go out in nature. And that's where I've learned a lot from seeing what it's doing out there on Mount Umunum. Another example of losing the lawn. This is a conversion from a Bermuda lawn full of weeds. And we converted to Carex Panza meadow to give the client that instant gratification. I overseeded with Festuca rubra. So that's why it looks like all green fuzz, but it really is a grass planted on grid, just like the Diamondia planted on grid. And Diamondia is, we put it in a play area, so it's a little softer, cushier for the kids. And then that's even grown in from a couple months. And sometimes habitat restoration is your goal. I'll go back to this one. This one is children's play area, family. So a lot of times it's like, what's the goal? What's going to be the main function of the garden? So this is where, thank you. I was like, where's the first time person? So knowing your goals and the long-term function. This client wants to have more natural habitat restoration. So this is kind of restoring things like a wildland, like Central Coast Wilds helps restore that kind of stuff. Here's another one just showing the creativity that your garden is your palette, so you could do whatever you want with it. This is a water-wise garden. We also did a rebate for, but the client wanted a labyrinth. So we did it with playing with the different plants and the numbers. I made it work. And that's it. Thank you. I hope I didn't go over too much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rachel, you are up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Klassen, and I am representing Central Coast Wilds Nursery over in Santa Cruz. So we are not part of Valley Waters Water District, but we do a lot of planting for them or a lot of growing as well. And so we're really excited to be here and talk a little bit more about this. So a few things that we're going to talk about are what our specialties are over at CCW and what the really means and how we can get success from all of those precautions and constraints that I'm going to be talking about. So Central Coast Wilds really specializes in site-specific and wholesale plants that are from native species. And we also are specializing in plants that are grown in Calophytos BMP section. And those plants are grown in a very clean sanitary function. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So one of the main approaches that we have is that we are using plants that are watershed specific. And there's many benefits to using watershed specific plants for planting, but some of them, all of them really come down to they have a higher success rate. And relating back to water, they also use a lot less water. But of course, like we were alluding to with Rebecca, they do still need water. They can't just go without any help. But it does help them a lot if we're going with that watershed specific approach. Now, there are still some constraints to the watershed specific approach. So it does take a lot of resources and time in order to collect and organize all of these seeds. And it's also important to remember that because we are going with watershed specific plants for many projects, we may be limited on how many plants are actually available to us for collecting. And so we need to be careful of not to over exacerbate or use too many seeds from one plant, because that may be the only plant in that area. We want to make sure that we're leaving some for nature. Now, the other specialty that we have is growing in BMP production. And that really just means that we have a separate nursery. So we have two sections of our nursery, one of which is following standard BMPs, which in our case is still very similar to our best management practices section of the nursery. But in our best management practices nursery, we really are taking that extra step to be extra cautious and super sanitary so that we're avoiding the spread of pathogens such as Phytophthora, which, show of hands, how many people know what Phytophthora is? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, super contagious. It's basically plant COVID. We'll just keep it at that. And while it is super great to follow these practices, it does take a lot of resources again. So one of the things that we do is we have these tables that are 3 feet tall, and that's just to avoid the splash of water on the ground, because Phytophthora, for instance, is a soil-borne pathogen. So when that water hits the ground, there's a chance that it could have a propagule or a spore in it, and that would be bad news to get on the plant. So we try to start clean, we collect clean as much as we can, and we sanitize as we go. So if there's a plant that has lots of exposed roots and soil all over it that we're taking from the field, with permission, of course, after cleaning it, we'll get a little soil off of it, and then we'll give it a diluted bleach dip. And as intense as that sounds, that's really the best way to keep the plant going while also taking it off and reducing the potential for pathogens. And after all is said and done with growing, hopefully we have clean plants, but we like to make double sure. So clients like Valley Water actually pay for extra testing, which is very intensive. It involves a lot of planning, a lot of calculations to get the right water to plant ratio. So we won't go into that too much, but just know that it is very intensive, but it does give us the best results to know that we're not going to introduce a pathogen into any space that is already a clean space. And again, it takes a lot of time and resources. So we have to cook our soil. We have to get it up to a temperature that is known to kill Phytophthora. We also have to build those tables, and we still like to use those tables in our regular nursery as well, just because it promotes healthier plants and we want to be a step above. And there's also cleaning ourselves as well when we are propagating. If we're switching between collections or switching between watersheds, we're always spraying our hands with alcohol before we enter the space. It's all fenced off, and so we're spraying off our boots. And we're also making sure that our clothes themselves are clean, because oftentimes you pick up a batch of plants and it's all over you now. And so if you're going to be testing or doing anything that involves making sure that you're extra clean, you need to have an apron on or something to become a barrier between you and anything that could be dirty. So lots of time that goes into these BMPs. And because they are fenced off like this, they are not the most accessible. And because they're not so accessible, it's not as retail friendly. But luckily, most of our customers that are looking for these BMP plants that are usually site specific as well, they are not really too worried about that, because they're ordering over the email. They're not really concerned about coming and seeing the plant themselves, although they will come and visit sometimes, but we have to go in with them because it's kind of a guided tour rather than show up, bring your kids and look at the plants. And one thing that is nice is that this demand is actually increasing. And while it is a lot of work, we do really appreciate our Cal Phyto's nursery, because it really does provide the best plants that we know and can feel good about sending out into the wild. And so, like I mentioned, we have a diverse set of clients. So we have both retail and landscaping folks, as well as the larger wholesale clients as well. And what each of those clients is looking for is quite different. And so we really try to meet the needs of both. But just to give an idea of what the retail folk are looking for, they're looking for something really showy, usually in a size that's very familiar, like a gallon pot. They want the chance to come and look at all the plants and see the beautiful things. And they probably want the convenience factor as well. And more wholesale folk are not so concerned with the showiness. They can be a little bit more drab. Natives are unfortunately not usually as showy as a lot of home gardeners would like, but they are beautiful in their own way and very strong. And for the wholesale clients, they usually are going for larger quantities and they need those special requirements met. So that's when our Cal Fido's BMP nursery comes into play. And they are also looking for more root-focused containers rather than those familiar large ones. So the best plants are the ones that we can sell to both customers and everyone is happy. And then, so things like this Ribes sanguineum or blood currant, you can see it's beautiful. It's a great pollinator plant. It also is doing great in this funny container that not everybody knows about. It's called a D pot. And what happens is it has more space for the roots. They really don't need to spread it horizontally as much as one might think. And you can see healthy, happy roots. This is just a young baby, but the second it goes in the ground, it's going to take off. So there are lots of challenges that we have to anticipate and think about when planning a project or collecting for a client. Here's a bunch, but I'll just kind of run through those really quickly. These are all just questions I kind of address every day at work. So do we have material already in stock? Is something already growing? Or are we going to have to go out and collect? If we're going to have to go collect, is it the right season? You have to really plan seasonally and even 2 years ahead sometimes, because there are some plants that are very slow or they have delayed germ. So you have to think about these things even in a 2-year time span. And if once you get those seeds or those propagules, you have to treat them, clean them, give them the conditions that they want in order to grow. Sometimes that involves mimicking winter and putting them in a fridge like we have over here. And once you get when you're planning on which propagules you're going to use to produce, usually it's a matter of timing. So some plants like manzanitas here, even though they produce beautiful berries, they're very slow and they are not the best success rate in general of germination. And so things like cuttings are usually going to be better and faster in that case. There's also the question of how much space do we have? Do we have enough space in the shade house? So all of these containers that landscapers might be a little bit more familiar with, the really skinny and deep containers, California natives are really focused on getting their roots down deep to get to that water source. And so we really focus on things like this tree band 5 over on the right, this D pot over here, and these tree pots. So the one picture that's not taken from our nursery is this one of the really large container on the ground. And those containers really hard to put up on a table and take care of. So it's just all around not something that we have the availability to grow. And there's also unforeseen things such as water constraints. We are on a well system. So if the power goes out because of a fire or a storm, we have no water for the plants. And so we have to be prepared. And a quick success story, hopefully at the end of everything. Oops, I think I forgot about time upsizing. So we also want to make sure that they're not overgrowing their pots and we're timing it just right, which can be quite tricky at times. And hopefully everything goes well. And we have some great success stories with Valley Water over at Saratoga Creek. This is one of our projects. And one of the reasons it was so successful is we already had really great soil and we had a multi-year plan. So we were able to adapt the plant list as we went to see which ones were most successful and kind of changing the plant list as we went to give it the best go for its future. Thank you all so much. And if you ever want to order some plants from us, you can visit our website or email us at sales. And if you have a question in particular for me, my email's there as well. Thank you all so much.
Great presentation, Rachel. Last but not least, Dan and Rhonda, the podium is all yours.
Good morning, everybody. Dan Greeley here with the City of San Jose Department of Parks Recreation. My role is I am capital budget manager. So very rare you would have a capital budget manager talking about landscapes, but I have been with the agency for many, many years. And here
My name is Rhonda Nurse, and I'm the Executive Director of Happy Hollow Foundation, and even more rare for me to come and talk to you about plants, but we have an exciting project to share with you.
And so with the city of San Jose, let me figure out how to the word.
Right, this one, let me do the mouse.
Yes, please. Thank you. So City of San Jose Department of Parks, Recreation, who are we? What do we do? Well, our department has 212 neighborhood parks, 65 miles of trails, and numerous recreation facilities to deliver services to keep people healthy and active and engaged. Acres under management, we have 3,600 acres of management. So we should be playing a very large role in habitat for California wildlife. And we do. Unfortunately, most of San Jose grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when water was cheap and thought to be plentiful. So much of our parks are turf and concrete. And we are changing. We are adapting. The community is wanting habitat. And we have a master plan, a strategic master plan for 20 years that's really guiding our decisions. So our 20-year master plan is called Activate SJ, and it's really guiding principles, our stewardship, taking care of what we have, nature, making sure people have access to nature, public life, equity and access, and really habitat and native plants really cross over in all of these. As a response, this strategic plan was adopted in 2019, right before COVID. COVID did kind of slow us down in implementing our 20-year plan as the world had changed. And city employees were still during COVID responding. And so we have a pollinator working group. We have employees from Department of Transportation, Environmental Services working with the Parks Department to make policy change and to make positive change. In the capital budget, we've had success. I've been able to work in about $300,000 in habitat installations. Those projects are in planning phase. But many of you in the room are our partners, and we have partner organizations, and they kind of are these grassroots efforts. We have about 25 parks that have pollinator gardens or habitat. Many of them have been led by community members coming forward and partnering with us. And today we're going to talk about one of those at Happy Hollow. Happy Hollow Park and Zoo is one of the City of San Jose's premier facilities. And to assist in operating that and resource development, we have Happy Hollow Foundation, which Rhonda will talk about in a bit. At Happy Hollow, there are many native plants and habitats. And one of the areas of the park is called Backyard Habitat. It is a pollinator garden with other installations and interpretive signs to really try to engage community members or zoo goers to install like items in their backyards. And I believe Rebecca has assisted at this in this area.
Yeah.
So again, this is one of the areas of Happy Hollow that's critical, I think, to habitat. I'm going to hand it over to Rhonda.
Can I see a show of hands of how many people have ever been to Happy Hollow? Okay, so you know a little bit about it. What you might not know, though, is Happy Hollow Park and Zoo is actually really committed to conservation as part of their accreditation. And one of those aspects is conservation. Happy Hollow has planted green roofs. They collect water. They use recycled water to irrigate the park in itself. And as the executive director of Happy Hollow Foundation, we are the nonprofit partner dedicating to supporting Happy Hollow in their efforts, and primarily conservation. One thing just to point out is we actually have a grant program for community members and organizations to apply for to encourage pollinator gardens in their own neighborhoods. That grant cycle is open until tomorrow, and so any of you may apply. That's what that slide is there. Just go to happyhollow.org to find out more information. As the executive director of the foundation, I primarily focus on fundraising to make improvements at Happy Hollow. And sometimes these improvements are financially out of reach. And so this is where we get to be scrappy and creative. And Monarch Meadow is a capital project that was actually called out in the master plan of Happy Hollow Park and Zoo. And the first approach was to apply for a Santa Clara County open space grant for $98,000 to get this project installed. I ran into several obstacles, mainly being able to sign a land use agreement since I do not own Happy Hollow and I could not get that land use agreement signed. So we came up with some other ideas, and it really was a community-based effort. And it started with a grant from an organization called Beautiful Day for $10,000, which ended up supplying all the plants for this project. But we hired a corporation called Kimley Horn to design this project. And I wanted to show you how this project comes down in terms of design and numbers. So the space is about 1/3 of an acre, and it's just outside the main entry plaza of Happy Hollow. And you cross this bridge, it's called the Bent Bridge, and below it, we imagine monarch meadows flying up to greet you and butterflies and all other kinds of animals to support a habitat. And so the idea was to formally landscape about the first 15 feet along the wall and then let the rest of the area be very natural. And then the area you see in green is kind of the second phase, which will be a hydro seed area that we are going to be installing in the next few months. And here's just a little bit of a snapshot of some of the plants. There were colorful ornamental shrubs, grasses. What else can you say?
Yeah, it's a California, it's 100% California natives or varieties of those. So there is definitely 2 species of milkweed. There are 2 species of ceanothus. There's some Arctostaphylos. It's just a good mix of California plants. We're going to get to some of the challenges in a bit. But again, we wanted to, the planted area near where people gather, we wanted to look more formal, right? So it is irrigated with a little bit more colorful perennials. And then as you move away from the gathering areas, it becomes more habitat-y and the plant, and there's more coyote bush, just things that are going to be more resilient and maybe don't need as much care.
So here's a little bit of the before and after, and you can't quite tell from the photos, but it's quite a slope. And that is one of the challenges that we'll talk with you about. But the area was not irrigated. It was pretty barren. There were some shrubs that had lasted and grown for a long time and a few crepe myrtles, but we really just clear cut the area, installed some irrigation in those first 10, 15 feet, and then installed about 755 plants over the course of one weekend with hundreds of volunteers. And there's Dan in that picture in the middle. He was his group with City of San Jose pollinators were integral in helping place the plants. Monarch Meadow, by the numbers, we had 10 people help plan this project over the course of an entire year. We utilized 210 volunteers to not only dig holes, place plants, but plant them and install 400 yards of cubic mulch. We used 745 plants, and all in all, over 3,000 volunteer hours helped this project come to life. And it really is, it's a living thing and it continues to come to life. We also were fortunate to procure over $38,000 worth of in-kind goods. For instance, the mulch was free. We used, is it Z-Best from the City of San Jose. And then in-kind services, $175,000. So again, out of pocket, the foundation actually spent about $20,000, but all in all, the project was worth about $250,000. Here's some challenges about the project.
So a large project for us, and especially for volunteers although we took 12 months to plan, it really went in 2 weekends. So this was a lot of effort. And with volunteers, you never know the skill level of your volunteers, right? Their ability levels. And this site was on a slope. So imagine in wheelbarrows moving 400 cubic yards of mulch onto this property. So there were just a lot of challenges with, can you have volunteers on a slope be digging and planting safely, right? And then soil conditions. This is an east-facing slope. Very rocky, a lot of, I don't really think it was native soil. I think it was backfilled and very rocky and very tough. And the site didn't have water, so we had to come up with an irrigation plan. Materials, we did really struggle. The nursery that we used did try their best to kind of source the plants that were on our landscape plan from the in-kind from Kimley. But as you are buying 750 plants, you don't get the numbers sometimes, and there's last minute substitutes, which, you're then in the fly over 2 weekends, changing your planting plan, which we were able to do quite well. But there were definitely some challenges. In critters, right? There are lots of critters in the Coyote Creek watershed. And so we were really worried installing this many plants, how many are going to actually make it. But we're doing well. And then to have over 200 volunteers over 2 weekends, weather, we were really worried that it was going to be really hot.
It was a heat wave, of course, the one weekend in October, right? It was over 90 degrees. Yeah.
And so again, this was an unconventional project, very successful, but just lots of many challenges. And I think just overall, the challenge for the Parks Department is we're installing native gardens or pollinator gardens is kind of the easy part. It is the stewardship after. California native plants take a while to grow. They're really putting all their energy into roots. So they don't outcompete weeds well. And so, that is our ongoing challenge here, is to make sure that we have partners to come forward to assist this to be a successful project.
I will add about the plant selection that we used Johnson Nursery, and they were actually super excited about this project because the plant list was so challenging that they said that they utilized every single one of their suppliers across the Central Coast to fulfill this order. And so I think they're all going to come out for a field trip to see what they were part of. As you can see, they still like to play in the dirt, and so do we. Some snapshots of all the volunteers that made this project happen. My favorite is the one there where you can see a long line of people, and it was just this chain of people moving river rock down the slope so that it could all happen safely. UA Local 393 were all the gentlemen with the blue wheelbarrows. We had 40 men come out and dig the 745 holes to prepare for the planting. Upper right corner is a snapshot of Beautiful Day, whose volunteer force came out over 2 days to plant all these plants. And I just encourage you all to come and visit us, see it for yourself. There's also opportunities to be inspired and for education for your clients or for yourselves or your organizations. And also, we're looking for volunteers. As you know, water is wonderful, but it also brings weeds. And we're looking for help with maintenance. So community partnerships or corporate social responsibility program is definitely an option. Thank you.
Okay, let's take some time to talk with our audience about native plants. Anyone have a question?
All right, I think we got a question on Zoom that we'll go to after. So.
Yeah, just do you expect to have your grant program next year, since the deadline's tomorrow? Is
this on? Yes. Yes, actually, the Progress for Pollinators grant program is available twice a year. So although tomorrow is the deadline, there are other opportunities. So just remember happyhollow.org.
All right, and then we have a question online. So for Happy Hollow, and I would say for City of San Jose as well, how do you train your maintenance staff?
A great question. So I think we mentioned ongoing maintenance is a challenge to care for native plants and weed. And in general, in kind of entry-level maintenance jobs, we have a lot of turnover, right? So it's a great question. I don't represent maintenance, but I have worked in that area in the past. And we do kind of have a 2-day training once a year where we go over all kind of maintenance tasks on chainsaw safety and chemical preparation. And so we have a robust training system, just there can be so much turnover in maintenance that it's hard to always catch them repeatedly, right? So when there's changeover, there are opportunities for people not to have the right knowledge to make the right decision. But it really is training and investing in your staff.
Hi, I have a couple questions. One was about the crappia. And I was, Rebecca, I was interested in learning more about if you have better success with the native Phyllonotiflora or the Cropia, and also plugs versus sod.
Testing, if you can hear me. It's all about your patience factor. If you don't have patience, then I would go with the Carapia. If you have time to wait, then I would go with the Phyla. And I've had terrible experience with sod. Maybe the growers have gotten better with it, but in my experience, it's been terrible and they don't really know what they're doing with it yet. And I've had best success with plugs.
Oh, excellent.
Sometimes critters will pull it out, and so we've laid like chicken wire over it. So that's probably the only downside of plugs is, you know, the birds, squirrels, everybody's curious when things are new.
If you have the patience to do the native, you would prefer that. Can you just expound on that?
It's kind of your perspective of how you want to garden. Like a lot of people, especially with native garden, are purist or generalist, where they want to be local watershed specific, or they just want pretty and colorful and don't care about cultivars. So that's your prerogative of how you want your garden to be.
Excellent. And my second question is, Rhonda, maybe you said this, I missed it. How big was the garden? What was the square feet?
Oh, the total site is 1/3 of an acre. And the area that we planted, what would you say, Dan?
It's about 9,000 square feet, just a little bit over that.
Thank you.
I had a huge light bulb shine listening to your presentations, and the light bulb was seeing the containers growing natives that are elongated because the roots grow down, not out on natives. I mean, I should know that after almost 50 years in the industry. I noticed that oaks that are weeds that I try to pull up are almost impossible, even when they're young, because the taproot is straight down. It makes me think that drip emitters near, not on the crown, but near a native plant, above ground, not below ground, please, is the right way to irrigate natives because of that light bulb going on, that you want the water to go straight down, not have inline emitters where you're putting water where the roots aren't going. So thank you for that.
Rebecca, do you want to address the irrigation at all, or any thoughts on?
There's many perspectives among irrigation too, and it may be, you know, it depends on how the garden is going to be managed in the long run. And I think there's pros and cons of point source irrigation where you're bringing the emitters right to the plant. I've seen that be very successful, but then if it's not, nobody's managing it to move those emitters as the plant grows. You know, like I talked about, you know, your belt around your waist, you have to expand things as it grows. Same with inline systems. Like master gardeners maybe know, like for fruit trees, sometimes I'll do concentric circles in the brown inline pipe. And then as that tree grows, remove the inner circle and expand to another outer circle. So, you know, I always say a garden is an evolution. It's always going to be changing, always going to be growing. And, you know, where the irrigation was on day 1 is not where it should be on day 365 or 3 years from there.
All right, we have time for one more. Oh, okay, we'll do very quick.
I'm sorry, I have a captive audience and I apologize, but with the topic of Phyllonotiflora, who propagates it well and what model of propagation? Was that plugs versus flats?
There's only limited supplies out there. So, you know, limited people that are growing it that I know of. So I think just your average internet search.
Great. I was just trying to propagate it myself and I've had very mixed results, but thank you very much. And then Rachel, I have a question for you. That's real specific. I'm sorry. When you bleach dip.
Yes.
Yeah. What percentage bleach solution do you dip, top and bottom or the whole plant? How long do you keep it in the water?
Yeah, so it's a 10% bleach solution, so 1 to 10 ratio. And you dip the whole plant in there after having already sprayed it down and removed any soil. And you keep it in there for at least 1 minute. We're doing a little swishing to make sure every crevice and corner is covered. And then afterwards, to make sure we're getting all that bleach off, we do a couple different rinse baths afterwards to get all that bleach completely rinsed off, so that we're starting off nice and like it just got a little shower of regular water.
And all your plant material is propagated from cedar cutting by your staff, is that right?
Almost everything. The one thing that we don't really do in-house is the starts for ferns, because you actually need a lab setting to grow those spores. So we do get those shipped in, and we have a supplier for that. But that's really the only one. Otherwise, we do most of our own collection, or a customer does the collection.
Thank you really so much.
All right, we have one last one, and then our speakers will be here. So I do encourage you at the breaks to go, find them, ask them some more specific questions, and they'd love to talk.
Rebecca, on the at least crappia or any lawn alternative, have you tried and or had success with subsurface irrigation?
Yes, for the rebate, you have to. You have to use inline drip for the rebate with ground lawn alternatives, ground cover. Yeah. So
Perfect.
primarily, yes, but it can work other ways, like that meadow I showed you. It would be ideal to have some overhead irrigation, at least in the beginning, to help those seeds germinate. So sometimes I've done like a temporary overhead sprinkler and then pull that once things are germinated. And if you're not doing it for the rebate, you can do whatever you want. Irrigation wise, no offense, but hopefully we're all making the best choices.
We actually do have a slight exception, so I can talk about that more
Okay,
after, but
good to know.
we can chat.
Thank
Okay, thank you so much. We are going to take a 13-minute break now. Please get up, stretch, go to bathroom, and refill your water.
Today, I'm going to be discussing non-functional certification. Specifically, I'll be covering these recently passed All right, so to start off, so AB 1572 is the state's ban on non-functional turf. This was approved just in October of last year, 2023, and this prohibits the use of potable water for the irrigation of non-functional turf on commercial, industrial, and institutional properties, or CII. It's a common acronym in our water world, and you've probably seen a few presentations here. And I also, if I say NFT, that's also, non-functional turf. So AB 1572 declares the use of potable water to irrigate non-functional turf is wasteful and incompatible with state policy relating to climate change, water conservation, and reduced reliance on the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta ecosystem. Non-functional turf is turf areas that are decorative and serve no other function, such as recreation. As I said, this law applies to CII, commercial, industrial, institutional properties, but also to common areas of HOAs, or homeowners associations, common interest developments, and community service organizations or similar entities. This law does not affect residential lawns, parks, sports fields, cemeteries, or golf courses, nor does it prohibit the use of potable water necessary to ensure the health of trees or to address immediate health and safety need. AB 1572 makes permanent a temporary state mandated drought emergency regulation that banned, this same thing, the irrigation of non-functional turf at these properties. That was put in place in June of 2022 and is set to expire June of 24. So this law basically just cements it in permanence. AB 1572 will take effect through a phased approach between 2027 and 2031. And you'll see there the breakdown of the years and what type of properties it applies to. So first off, we have state and local government started. They need to comply by January 2027. The following year, it applies to other institutional, commercial, and industrial properties. Then in 2029, it applies to the HOAs and similar entities, followed by 2031, which applies to local government buildings in disadvantaged communities. The bill authorizes a public water system, city, county, or city and county to enforce this law. Primary enforcement authority is provided directly to urban retail water suppliers. With non-compliance is subject to civil liability and penalties of up to $500 or those imposed by local ordinance. Public water systems, which essentially includes our water retailers that we have here in our county, are required to incorporate the prohibition into their own local regulations and can enforce it similar to how other water waste restrictions are enforced. In the event one of our urban water retailer suppliers is not enforcing the provisions of this law, other public water systems may take enforcement action, and Valley Water does meet the definition of a public water system. So therefore, we can play a role as needed. And our existing water waste program will continue to serve as a countywide intake platform for water waste reports. That's been mentioned a few times. We have the app, we've got email address and phone for people to submit violations of this particular prohibition and all the others that we have as well. And to switch gears now, so that was all the details on the state ban. And now for the Valley Water Ordinance, which again does include this prohibition on non-functional turf. This was approved by our board in June of 2023, and it expanded upon and replaced a prior water waste related ordinance. The ordinance lists several water waste prohibitions applicable to property owners in Santa Clara County that receive some or all of their potable water supplied or managed by Valley Water, either directly by us or through a water retailer. The ordinance defines enforcement procedures during non-water shortage times, which we're in right now. We're not in a drought. And it defines our approach when we are in a drought. And basically the difference between those two is when we're not in a drought, it's a purely educational effort to educate people about the violations on the property. And when we are in a drought, we're still going to take that educational forward approach, but with the option to issue fines after non-compliance, after repeated attempts to notify the property. Water retailers and municipalities may have their own enforcement procedures for water waste violations separate from Valley Water's process. But we will communicate with the appropriate agency to ensure that there's no double enforcement happening or anything like that. And per our enforcement process, before we ever issue a fine, we always loop in the water retailer and give them a chance to conduct their own outreach and procedures to gain compliance. And that's always the goal, is just to get properties to comply. And we're not out there to try and issue fines left and right. It's just voluntary compliance is the ultimate goal. The Valley Water Ordinance defines non-functional turf as turf that is solely ornamental and does not serve a community or neighborhood function, including use for recreational purposes or civic or community events. So non-functional turf, some examples real quick: streetscape turf along public or private streets, sidewalks, along driveways, parking lots, business streetscape frontage areas. And then functional turf is, that is needed to serve human function for, mainly those recreational purposes. Again, it doesn't apply to single family residential homes, parks, sports field, anything like that. But some properties may, qualify like a cemetery. A cemetery is, serves a function, but there could be like strips along the outside of the perimeter or like other areas which aren't necessarily functional. So just an example of, property can have both functional and non-functional turf. And real quick here. So the main differences between the state ban and our ordinance is the timeline. So AB 1572, as I described earlier, it's more of a phased approach over between 2027 and 2031, while our prohibition is already in place. Although ours is in place, like we don't expect full, more widespread compliance. We expect that more in line with the phased approach in the coming years. And I'm just going to really quick here. I know I'm up at time. I'm just going to show some quick examples of non-functional turf here. So here we have outside of a bank and then outside of a gas station. These are like very clearly, no one's having a picnic or throwing a frisbee outside of a bank on a big field of grass. And same with the gas stations there. Some more here. Again, like more streetscape, just, these are islands inside of commercial properties or again, right against the street, or the picture on the right there is a residential property, that's with a slope. And again, like no one's doing anything on these strips of grass. Then just some more examples here for the sake of time. I'm not going to linger on these. This is an example though we do want to quickly highlight is, so this is an example of an area that there's turf, but there's tree canopies. So on the right side of the picture, you'll see all the grass like beneath the tree canopy, that is allowed to be irrigated for the sake of the trees. But then in the foreground here of the on the left-hand side, like that area, there's no canopy under there. So that area would have to be converted and, cannot be irrigated. Just even though the irrigation might be on the same zone, it needs to be adjusted so that it's only irrigating beneath the tree canopy there. And one last quick example of just a school here. So although, again, like just the example of non-functional versus functional, on the very right-hand side, we've got the baseball field that's obviously serves a function. But at the top of the picture, you'll see just the grass area that, likely serves no function. I don't think kids are even allowed out there like during lunchtime. So again, it's just there for ornamental purposes. And for next steps, I won't go into too much detail here, but essentially, this law is going to take time and effort to come into compliance. We hope to partner with our water retailers and also, utilize any state messaging about this effort to, save water from eliminating non-functional turf. And then for us, as we've described in previous presentations, we have our landscape rebate program to help with compliance. And with that, I'm done. I'll pass it on to the next.
Thank you, Phil. Next up, we have Loren McIrvin, owner CEO of Allied Landscape.
Well, I'd like to start just by saying for being a landscape professional, especially landscape contractor, I'm very appreciative of the fact that Valley Water has taken the time to have this summit. The concept of us being able to come here with our staff, be able to network with our other landscape professionals in the room and be able to learn from each other, it's very much appreciative. So I'd like to start with that. Today, what I'm going to be covering is how a landscape management contractor would approach AB 1572. Again, my name is Loren McIrvin. I'm with Allied Landscape. I'm a general contractor. I'm a certified irrigation auditor and designer. But I think where I get the bulk of my experience is I grew up in a landscape management family. I've been doing this for an extended period of time. The longer I do it, I figure out how much I don't know. So there's been a lot of hard lessons learned. And each week, each day just gives me an opportunity to learn a little bit more and try to figure out how to do what I do better. What I have learned, though, being a contractor in the state of California, is the concept of having to deal with change. And what I would suggest is any company that's in the room having some type of standard operating practice around the concept of change, whether we're talking about the particular ban on or prohibition on irrigating non-functional turf, or if we're dealing with COVID, or if we're dealing with new laws that come down, the concept of having a way to approach change, I think is pretty important. What I'm going to cover is the concept of starting with identification and clarity around the concept of what the change is in front of us, then analyzing that and taking a look at the opportunity and the challenges that come with that particular issue, and then the concept of education, gathering a lot of information, distilling that down and putting it out to the stakeholders that represent the issue. So with that, again, change for my company. I started this, my company is Allied Landscape. I started in 2005. I would say year after year, we have to deal with regulatory changes. We have to deal with the fact that drought, we see it and then we don't see it, and then we see it, we don't see it. So whether it's environmental based, whether it's driven based on the concept of dealing with updated regulations, or if it's the concept of just dealing with continuous improvement. My company kind of embraces change. We like the idea of upping our game and improving how we do things. And what we start with, again, is identifying what the change is and trying to offer clarity. Now, I'm not going to go back through what was just covered in terms of what's attached to this particular assembly bill, but rather the concept of trying to distill the information down, trying to make things simple for the stakeholders you're working with. I work with a lot of homeowners association and a lot of commercial property managers that are very short on time. And what we try to do is we try to take the facts and really distill them down, not just for our internal team, but also the customers we serve. So what I would suggest is, when at all possible, try to distill any change down to its simplest form. So when you put that in front of stakeholders, you've got an idea of exactly what's going to happen, how the timeline is going to work, and how best to approach it. After we've concentrated on identification and clarity, then we focus on analysis. And this comes down to opportunities and challenges. And what I would suggest from a landscape contractor's perspective, we have the opportunity to educate our customers and educate our team. The concept of upping our game and making our industry more sophisticated by approaching landscape management in a meaningful way. So we have the opportunity to educate. We also have the opportunity to lead. Part of my life is volunteerism at the California Landscape Contractors Association, and the concept of us working together as landscape contractors to try to improve how we do things is a big part of what we do. And what I would say for the business owners out there, by leading, you attract great talent to your companies. If you can lead the charge and say, this is what's important to us, this is what we're focusing on, you will inevitably attract landscape professionals that want to be leaders and want to focus on doing what's right by the customer and what's right by the industry. But I want to touch on some of the negative pieces. Change is painful, right? It takes time, it takes money. So having folks out in the audience with your company, dedicating the time and energy, change is painful and it requires an investment that needs to be committed to year after year. Beyond that, there's risk to landscape professionals around an assembly bill like this. For example, we very well could see a bunch of artificial turf pop up like we've seen with the drought over the last few years. We could really see opportunistic type companies that are seeing an opportunity and steering our customers or steering properties in a particular way. I would say inevitably, like the drought, this bill will inevitably prop up artificial turf installers, will prop up paver installation. You'll see more rock mulch, all of which is probably not the best for our local ecology. So trying to figure out how to best frame messaging around that's important. From a property owner's perspective, the concept of getting rid of turf has a lot of win-wins tied to it. Decreased operating cost in terms of water and in terms of maintenance cost. Decreased liability, decreased property damage. The concept of these sprinklers popping up and spraying things, whether that's glass, whether that's wood, whether that's asphalt, in terms of degradation tied to property damage, there's a lot of pros in terms of getting rid of it. Beyond that, the concept of having the rebates or the investment assistance that's available right now, that's very unique. It was mentioned that just over the hill on the coast, they're not looking at it that way. What they're doing in Santa Cruz is increasing the cost of water by double and decreasing all of the rebates that are available. These rebate programs are very finite, and unless you have somebody like Valley Water who's committed to the long term, it's something that should be utilized before it's gone. The concept of bringing up our landscape efficiency standards to just modern day building standards, I think is lost on a lot of property owners. If you tried to take a landscape that was 30 years old and tried to get it through the building process, it wouldn't even have a chance. Too much turf. The way the turf is laid out doesn't work. The way the irrigation system is designed and installed wouldn't meet today's current efficiency standards from a building permit standpoint. So something to think about. Now, the risk to the customer, and I think this is important because I've gone through a lot of droughts. My dad dealing with one in the late 90s. If you don't approach replacing the grass with a well thought out irrigation system, with a well thought out soil preparation, without a well thought out planting plan, you very well could fast forward 5 years from now and find out that half the natives are gone because they weren't maintained right. Or they just, the concept wasn't put into the overall installation that needed to be done from its inception. So what I would caution everybody is it's great to remove grass, but if you don't do it in a meaningful way, you could see half of that landscape gone in under 3 to 5 years. Now, quickly, I'm only going to touch on the last piece, and this is how we educate our property owners. We go through a series of steps to try to guide them through it. And I'm happy to talk to anybody offline, but it has everything to do with making sure they're aware that we're here to help and how to go through the process from design all the way through the estimating process and then maintenance. Maintenance really needs to include accountability for the water use that goes into the future, as well as the maintenance. Lastly, I've got just a couple slides that ties to awareness campaigns that we put out that I would welcome any discussion around. And then the concept of celebrating your results and making sure that your team is proud, that your customers are proud of the water savings and the aesthetic differences that you've made on those properties. Ran a little bit long, I'm sorry. I'll be around for questions.
Thank you, Loren, and thank you for bringing so many of your team members today. Next up, we have Shannon Rossow with Environmental Programs Coordinator with the City of Morgan Hill.
All right, thank you everyone for having me here today. Like we said, I'm Shannon Rossow, Environmental Programs Coordinator with the City of Morgan Hill, here to talk to you today about the non-functional turf ban. So taking us down a little bit of memory lane that we've touched on a little bit here, the regulation timeline, how it came into play, starting with the state with the temporary ban in June of 2022, then Valley Water coming in with their also temporary ban. Both of those then became permanent more recently. Morgan Hill as a city took it into our local hands to adopt our own local ordinance in February of 2023. So that's been in effect now for just a year, in February. As it's been mentioned a little bit before, the state and Valley Water have ongoing outreach to inform residents and community members of these regulations that have come into play, and the City of Morgan Hill is doing the same. So what is in our ordinance? We have amended our already existing ordinance, our water waste ordinance, to include the ban on non-functional turf. So with that, we adopted the ban itself by just adding one portion. And we also included the definitions of CII property, non-functional turf, and functional turf. So both of those things can now be found in our already existing water waste ordinance, which includes our schedule restrictions, watering dates and times that are in permanent place. Also regulates, leaks need to be fixed, any runoff prevention, all of that. So this is tied into our already existing ordinance. How did we get there? We had a little bit of outreach before the community or the city council adoption of this. We announced the proposed ban to the community at large. We have a weekly newsletter that comes out every Friday to the citizens that are signed up for this newsletter. So we announced it via that. Also via our social media platform. So we announced to the community before that February 2023 adoption that this was coming down the pipeline. We also sent direct mailers to our top 50 CII properties to let them know that this was coming to council and to invite them to participate in a community meeting that was going to be held.
So we held that community meeting and had, people come and discuss and have any feedback before we brought it to council in February. Since then, since the adoption, we have been doing some general outreach to the community at large. We have a dedicated webpage for this item. Information on the regulation, any definitions, the rebates available through Valley Water, and success stories can be found on this dedicated website. Also, we've conducted widespread outreach to all community members. We want to spread the information to as many people as possible, so we do that in many ways. We have newsletters, our specific environmental services newsletter, and like I previously mentioned, this 411, it's the weekly Friday newsletter. We put information about it into our recreation guides. So that way, if you are, signing your kids up for summer camp or interested in going to the pool, you might flip a page and see that this is a ban happening in our local city, and you might be a small business owner, or you might live in an HOA community. We wanted to spread this to as many people as possible, so we really spread it throughout the community in as many ways. Directly, we also reached out to our business community via our business newsletter, and we also send it to all community members via our water report that comes out every other month. So if you have a water bill, you get a water report, and this comes to you directly. And also social media posts as well. So this is our ongoing continuous efforts that we do all the time. As far as our ongoing direct outreach, specifically to the CII community, a few months back, we conducted an e-blast newsletter directly to all CII properties throughout the city of Morgan Hill. So that went directly to business owners, commercial, industrial, institutionals. Quarterly, in addition to that, we do monitor and connect with our top 100 commercial, institutional, our CII properties in the city. So that means we pull our data every quarter, and those that fall into the top 100 customers as far as usage, they will receive a letter. And our whole point in that is to reduce water use by our top members of the community. So if they are in violation of the watering schedule, if they're not following the current watering schedule at that day, we'll send them a letter notifying them of that. And if they have a leak on their property, whether that's a burst or an ongoing small leak, we will let them know. We see this as an opportunity to include this non-functional turf ban. Since we are reaching out to them directly for another purpose, we also want to include this new ban because it might be applicable to them. So we include this flyer that Valley Water created into that letter sent to the business owner. And then after that, we will connect with them directly, either via phone call or email. We will try to reach that property owner in as many ways as possible to inform them that this is now mandated in the city. So if that property does have non-functional turf, we'll inform them and we'll continue to educate, work with them, create a plan to help them identify the non-functional turf on the property and ensure that those irrigation systems are turned off. And if they choose to convert, that is up to them to make it into a drought tolerant landscape. Next steps. So we will continue to do these quarterly reports to our top 100 CII customers. We are also continuing to do all the general outreach to the community at large that I was earlier discussing. We're going to take the next step and conduct these visual surveys of properties, CII properties throughout the city in a geographical pattern. So we are going to be starting in the south, working our way to the north, and going along the main roadways throughout Morgan Hill that are most visual and most seen. And we're going to be just noting down and identifying properties that do have non-functional turf, right? These are most visual. They have the streetscape that Phil was identifying earlier as around those gas station areas. Anything that's a streetscape, curbscape, anything like that, we'll be noting down and identifying. Then the next step would be to reach out and communicate directly with that owner and let them know that this ban exists, right? The first step is always, knowing that it's there, understanding it completely, and then coming into compliance. So we'll focus on the non-functional turf areas that do not have trees first. This is because it's kind of a clear definition of what is non-functional. We'll get into trees a little bit later, but for our first step, we want to go with kind of, the more simple route where we can identify clearly this is functional, not functional. So we will drive from the south to the north of Morgan Hill. As soon as everything has been identified and noted there, we will circle around and start phase 2 and identify and talk to those that have trees on the property.
So I want to talk a little bit about challenges. We are in the field, we are on the ground, we are talking to residents, business owners, community members, and there are a lot of challenges and conversations that we have every day. And so I want to talk about those for just a minute here. And the first step, like I mentioned, is that we reach out to customers. So finding the right person who is that decision-making person in the business is one of the hardest parts. We might, have someone who answers the phone and they are not the person making the decisions. They're not the one talking to the landscaper. So they might, give us another phone number or tell us to call back later. And so we kind of end up with this circle of trying to reach the right person. And then once we finally do reach the right person, having them fully understand and grasp what is required of them. So fully understanding the regulation. Another challenge that we run into is with irrigation zones. There are certain areas that might have functional and some that might have non-functional. So identifying what areas can be watered and continue to run the irrigation as normal, and then those that might need to be capped or turned off. We do have challenges and conversations with owners worried about their property values declining. And, we do offer them, of course, the Valley Water rebate. And in the city of Morgan Hill, we do match that. We add an extra $10,000 to the already $100,000 for a commercial property. So we add a little bit more funding there to encourage them to install these drought tolerant landscaping. Another issue that we run into is with properties that have neighboring properties that aren't complying. So if you are doing everything you can within your power to come into compliance and abide by this ban, and then you look down the street and you see 10 folks that aren't, that can, kind of stir up some unsettling feelings there. So then we will go to those owners down the street and talk to them. So it's always by, requests that we can go further. Another thing is financial constraints. If you have a large property, $110,000 can give you some help. But if you have an extremely large property with, 6 or 8 watering accounts, it might take a little bit more. Another one that I won't get into too much because we're going to talk about it here in depth in a moment is trees. So as it's written in the ordinance and, state, Valley Water, everything too, it's underneath the tree canopy. But right next door, there might be non-functional turf area that is not underneath the tree canopy. So working to identify those areas. And I just want to clear up too that the goal of this is never to diminish the health of the trees or remove trees. We want trees for shade, for reducing our heat island effect, sequestering carbon and wildlife ecosystem. So that's never the goal of this. We always encourage any high efficiency irrigation systems to still have our trees. And really quickly before I take off, amongst all of those challenges, I do want to point out a few successes. It's really encouraging and uplifting when we do have residents and business owners in the community who see either our direct outreach or just a general, social media post, or they see it in the newsletter and they call and they ask, what can I do? We do have that. So amongst all the challenges and the hard conversations that we do have community owners, business owners reaching out to us saying, I have non-functional turf on my property. What can I do? So we love helping them in those regards and leading them to the Valley Water rebates and seeing what is possible. We do have areas that have just shut off the turf and continue to have brown, dry lawns during the summer. And then we also have those that have taken advantage of the rebate program and done these conversions. So we see both. We see brown, dry grass, and then we also see projects that are completed or in the midst right now of working on those renovations and conversion projects. So we are seeing this throughout the city. And I do want to point out, I said it a little bit ago on our website, we do have one of these success stories posted on our website. It's a short, I think 2-minute video if you want to see one of our local communities. It's a residential community that has taken their gathering space and converted it from turf. And it was about 26,000 square feet of turf was removed and replaced with drought tolerant plants and high efficiency irrigation systems. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Next up to put a bow on this panel is Kyla Phillips, who's with Newpath Landscape.
Hi, I'm Kyla Phillips. I'm a certified arborist from the International Society of Arboriculture and an account manager for the maintenance crews for Newpath Landscape. And I'm just gonna kind of follow up on what Shannon and Loren have talked about, the non-functional turf and the irrigation regulations and how it has affected communities and commercial properties and kind of the process of them converting over. Just a little information about Newpath Landscape. We were founded in 2006 by Filiberto Fonseca. If you want to raise your hand. He was a lifelong Santa Clara County resident, and we were formerly affiliated with Allied Landscape Services South with Loren until we rebranded as Newpath Landscape Services in 2019. We started working in commercial landscape development in 2012 and have grown our construction department. And we're currently at 140 employees, and we're based in Morgan Hill, a local company in the area. So what we do is we work with commercial landscape maintenance. We service HOAs, commercial properties, municipalities, master plan communities. And with those relationships that we build with the clients, we also offer recommendations such as lawn conversions, with enhancement projects and ways to upgrade their properties and make them more environmental and aesthetically pleasing and functional for the communities themselves. We have an irrigation department that we audit our properties regularly. Our certified technicians do a great job at trying to offer recommendations to upgrade irrigation systems. A lot of manufacturers have a lot better technology these days to put less water down compared to the old irrigation systems that wasted a lot of water and had a lot of runoff issues. So we've had nearly 20 years experience with landscape rebate programs, and I've worked with many water districts working at trying to reduce water. One last thing is our development landscape department. We build up entire communities and commercial sites from the ground up. And those resources really help us on our maintenance side with our clients, offering those resources and knowledge that we have to give to our clients. So the main thing I wanted to touch base on, which they slightly touched base on already, was the HOAs and their responses to the restrictions. Just as Loren was saying, change is difficult. There's usually a negative immediate reaction from homeowners, especially in HOAs that have monthly fees and monthly dues. And their budgets are very tight. Landscaping is one of the last things on their budget. They have, other hardscapes and other building safety issues that they have to address first. So this is really a budget issue for them. I know that a lot of them actually do want to try and work at saving water. It comes down to money, and it does help. Thank you, Valley Water and the cities that have helped with these rebates. It does help incentivize them to start moving forward. Some of the challenges for residentials especially is people who are used to walking their dogs and having those mow strips. They have children that are playing on their front lawns. And HOAs are unique too, where different zones, even though they're common areas in the HOAs, they extend over multiple homes. So it's difficult sometimes to just convert one area that a homeowner wants when the neighbor homeowner wants the lawn for their kids. And they really should be converted on the same system. We shouldn't have drip that needs a certain precipitation rate with other sprinklers that have higher precipitation rates. So it's a difficult process planning wise to convert these big zones over the HOAs. A lot of property owners are worried about the aesthetics and property value loss and the time it's going to take to convert these areas because it does attract new tenants for them. And if they have brown lawns, it's a lot difficult for them. Another thing is education, is understanding that when we do convert these lawns, the new plants often take a little bit more water to establish. It's not an immediate water loss because there is that establishment time where plants need more regular water before they can become more drought tolerant. Some of the future costs they are concerned about are mulch replenishments and future maintenance costs that could occur once they get rid of the turf. Some of those can be addressed by putting in more ground cover and drought tolerant spreading plants that will eliminate the need for mulch. But I do, I appreciate Valley Water for having us come speak on behalf of our clients and our HOAs and property managers, because they do face a lot of difficulties converting these areas. Some of the differences between HOAs and commercial sites is just the decision making. A lot of HOAs are consisted of volunteer boards. They're volunteer members from the community with limited time, and it takes a lot of time for them to vote and agree on things. So it's a difficult, more decision-making process versus commercial sites usually have one property manager or owner that makes the final decisions. I think we covered most of some of those other things on the other, budget scale. I think the biggest thing with HOAs, a lot of the older sites have just lawn covered. That's how they were developed in the past. Lawns in the front yard, bow strips in front. Now we see development. They have one central lawn and then the rest it's not the functional turf. So I think changing it, we have requested that it be done, phased out. And I do see, Shannon from Morgan Hill has been very helpful working with clients as well, designating, well, let's start with these areas first, the areas that don't have trees, that are more visible, that are wasting the most water, and then slowly work down to the other areas and address those as needed. I think that's it on that. One of the biggest challenges as well are trees. We were just discussing kind of holding off on some of the tree areas, but a lot of lawn areas do have trees, and we are converting areas with trees within them. And I just want to go over, we talked about how important it is to address this climate change, and protecting trees is very important in urban areas to lower carbon emissions, filter pollution, mitigate extreme heat and precipitation, reduce land erosion, flooding. With all these rains we've had, they are a great asset to help us combat all of the climate issues that we are facing. So as we convert these lawns and change these landscapes, it's very important for us to protect those trees and make sure we're creating a plan to make them more sustainable so they will last. The importance of tree roots. In the urban area, a lot of tree roots did not develop those deep root systems because they were in lawns. So a lot of these trees, most of their roots are on the top 18 inches, and they spread out 50 times from the trunk. So a lot of people will say, oh, we'll keep the water just underneath the canopy, but the roots are well beyond that. And kind of finding a way to still irrigate those tree roots and keep them protected so we reduce tree stress is very important as we go forward. One of the things I wanted to point out is just properly irrigating the trees. If you are going to be converting in those areas, it's good to deep soak water those trees to make sure that they're prepared for the stress they're about to take. There is going to be root damage if you're planting around the trees. And as you eliminate that turf, they're also losing that protection they had on top. So one thing as contractors and to educate our clients and for us all to work together to protect the trees as we go forward is also installing tree protection zones around those trees to avoid compaction during the construction process and not using manually removing that turf instead of running machines over it, sod cutters and excavators, just to really protect those tree root zones to keep their health. And during the lawn removal, to not also raise the grade over roots. Roots need that oxygen in order to survive. So it's very important just protecting that we don't change the grade and reduce their oxygen, and also to keep water on them. One of the difficulties with the trees and lawns is they require a different amount of water and different type of watering than most other plants. So when we're converting to a zone that's turf that has both trees and lawn, it often costs a little more money to invest in either adding a zone for those trees to deep root water them or to create a grid zone that all those tree roots are being watered with the other plants. I think Rebecca also spoke about kind of the evolution of the irrigation and how it changes over time. As the trees grow, we don't want to put too much water at the trunk, but we want to extend it out. And I think it's very important that we look at how we're irrigating in the conversion and looking out for the trees as we go forward. These are just a few examples of some of the lawn conversions we've done. One of the sites was a big commercial site, and you can see what a wasted big, huge piece of lawn that was wasting a lot of water, and just kind of the progress photo, and that afterwards you can choose a lot of spreading plants to cover and color to convert areas. These are just a few other conversion photos of commercial sites that we have converted, and just the color and differences that it makes for the property management itself. This is an HOA lawn conversion. This one was a little easier to start with. As mentioned, it's non-functional. There was drainage in that area and slopes, so that wasn't being used by the public at all anyway. And that over time, converting that for the property can add value as well. That's it. I want to thank everyone for letting us talk, and thank you.
Thank you to our panel. We have 5 minutes for questions, so it's
Actually, I have a couple of questions. First of all, because of the Valley Water Ordinance last June where they passed a permanent ban and AB 1572, what is the actual ruling as far as watering non-functional turf? And number two, can an HOA basically say, well, I'm going to do something in the next 5 years. I'm going to continue to water this non-functional turf until I finally make plans. And number three, my question is, currently the state nor Valley Water have any kind of guidelines or any kind of regulations as to what an HOA can decide on what is functional, non-functional turf. For example, because a dog walkers walk across the turf, is it functional now? Can I put a bench on this lawn as a rest area and make the turf now functional? So just give us some guidelines on that.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, hi, Phil from Valley Water. So the first part of the question, so technically, yes, Valley Water's ordinance is active right now. So yeah, non-functional turf should not be irrigated at all. But, we live in the real world. We realize that this is going to take time. If we do receive reports through our waterways platform of irrigating non-functional turf, we will respond as we would any other restrictions. But we're not actively going out and patrolling to outreach to these properties yet. These kind of there's overlap, but as I mentioned, and you did too, like the timeline of our ordinance versus the state ban is they're not quite 1-to-1. But again, like we recognize this is going to take time and effort, and we want to just work with properties to achieve the goal. But yes, it's going to take time, effort, and yeah, we'll probably come up with more guidelines in terms of like the functional versus non-functional turf for like the HOAs, like you mentioned for the third part of the question. What was the second part again? Okay. Okay. So again, like, yeah, technically, like they shouldn't be doing that. And, we're going to do, what we can in our power to try and incentivize them. We'll do our enforcement process. We're in a drought right now, or sorry, we're not in a drought right now. So, our process is, mainly educational. So, we'll try and steer them in that direction, but if that's what they're going to do, then, we're not going to be too heavy-handed in terms of enforcement.
I think we have a question from Zoom. I think this may be for Kyla. You mentioned that rock mulch is not good, but what is the recommendation for fire-safe landscaping? At least in the first 7 feet from a building, do you have a better recommendation?
More Loren.
Yeah, for me, I think it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish in the landscape. I guess what I think about when I think about rock mulch is visiting the Southwest and the concept of rock covering the entire square footage. If you have a functional aspect that's tied to a small buffer zone, whether that is to keep water away from the house or whether that's for fire clearance, I can understand those functional uses. I just think the idea of a dominant mulch being rock is probably counterproductive to our local ecology and climate change. Yeah.
Last question, front left.
So I had a question for Loren. I was wondering, for HOAs, do they typically give you a landscape design that they'll approve, or will you create one and give it to them?
Yeah, the concept for us is to work them through the design process. And that, I think the key and the advice that I would give to anybody in this room is starting with the concept of mapping the functional and non-functional areas, and then surveying the company or surveying the homeowners association with what's aesthetically pleasing to them. So the concept of putting a bunch of different images in front of them in something like SurveyMonkey or MailChimp and saying, trying to get at what the end result will look like, and then develop a plan based on that survey results and putting together some renderings to really help them visualize what the project will look like long-term.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our speakers. And if you have questions for them, most of them will be here throughout the afternoon. So thank you all.
What a great session. Thank you, panelists and Brian. Finally, we have Natalie Van Doorn, who will be presenting on climate-ready trees. Dr. Natalie Van Doorn is a research urban ecologist at the USDA Forest Service, Pacific Southwest Research Station, based out of Oakland, California. She is interested in what drives change in urban and wildland forests, how forests are vulnerable to disturbances and stressors, and what can be done to improve their resiliency. She's also a co-PI on the Climate Ready Trees Study, a data-driven approach to evaluate the ability of promising underused species to tolerate stressors of future climates. She earned her bachelor, master's, and doctorate degrees from UC Berkeley, focusing on forest ecology. Dr. Van Doorn, please go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. So today, as the presenter mentioned, I'm going to talk about climate-ready trees. What are they, and what we at the Forest Service, in collaboration with University of California, are doing to evaluate different species and cultivars for use in our urban forests. So as the slide here shows, this is a collaboration with UC Davis and UC Cooperative Extension. We have many collaborators I'd like to thank. And this project that I'm going to go deeper into was created by Dr. Allison Berry and Greg McPherson, UC Davis and Forest Service. So as we all know, cities in California are facing increasingly extreme climatic events. And we need creative strategies to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Urban trees are considered a nature-based solution to mitigate some of these changes in climate. They're a great way to improve livability in cities and towns. Currently in California, the urban tree canopy cover is around 15%, kind of on average across the different urban areas. CAL FIRE aims to, by 2030, to increase the canopy significantly. So of course, this will vary depending on the area, but they want to target disadvantaged and low canopy areas. But to reach that goal, just planting trees is not enough. These trees need to survive, and the existing trees need to survive for the canopy to cover to grow. And so if we want to keep attaining those ecosystem services and social benefits of trees, we need to make sure that they remain healthy and what we plant is surviving. So having a diverse mix of species that are well adapted to future conditions, which is what we call these climate-ready trees, is critical to fostering a smooth transition to a more stable and resilient urban forest. So climate-ready trees are those well adapted to face both present and future climatic challenges such as heat, drought, extreme weather events, and pests and pathogens. And so when I talk about species, I'm also including cultivars. So the objective of the study that we started now 7 or 8 years ago, we're calling it the Climate Ready Trees Study, is to help create a more resilient urban forest by shifting the palette of tree species to those that we think might perform well under these climate stressors. So essentially, we want to minimize tree loss. So our approach was to develop a 5-step process to identify and evaluate the survival and growth of seldom used but promising tree species. And we're doing this in 3 climate zones in California. Inland valleys, which is colored here in turquoise, kind of centered around Sacramento, Central Valley. Inland Empire, which is down in Southern California in orange. And Southern California coast, which is the pink part of the coast in Southern California. So these are 3 distinct climate zones that we're looking at. And trees are going to be evaluated for a 20-year period. So our first task was to outline this process of how do we select these trees, and how do we go through the process of evaluating them. And so our aim was to make something that was approachable, repeatable. Municipalities can do it. Tree planting organizations could do it. We tried to make sure to rely on publicly available data for all of these steps. So the first 2 steps are to evaluate the climate trends and exposures and to identify promising species. Next, we scored the species, selected the finalists, and then kind of the most costly step in this whole project to actually source the trees, plant them, and then evaluate them for 20 years. And then, of course, as I'm doing now, sort of sharing preliminary results, and then along the way, sharing out results through different media. So the first step was to evaluate climate trends and exposures. So for California, based on climate model projections, in each of our climate zones, we're expecting around a 5-degree Fahrenheit increase in average minimum temperatures over the next 75 years, and about 6 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit increase in average maximum temperatures. For precipitation, the models are a little bit more varied, or they're showing kind of more varied results. But overall, we're expecting stronger storms with more precipitation during each of those rain events, stronger winds, but also at the same time, more likelihood of these mega droughts, one of which we've just been through. So the second step was to start looking at which potential species and cultivars could we start introducing to these 3 climate zones. And so we reached out to different horticulturalists, growers, nursery growers, academics, those familiar with city trees in warmer regions. So based on the climate projections that we were looking at. We asked them what species do they think could do well in the future. So then we cross-referenced those recommendations with what's currently in our inventories. So we had 39 inventories across California, tree inventories, that we could cross-reference to make sure that what we were going to be testing isn't something that's already widely planted. So the third step was to score the species, so give them some kind of ranking. So after considering the climate trends and exposures, we came up with, this was the sort of the rubric that we came up with. So looking at the physiology of the trees, the biological interactions, habitat, preferences of these species. So this matrix sort of considers the adaptation of species to local environmental conditions, as well as tolerance to stress associated with climate change. And so in addition to these, we also wanted to consider traits that would be important for these trees as city trees, as in urban systems. So things that aren't necessarily related to climate change, but would make a difference as to whether somebody would want to plant these as a street tree, for example, or a backyard tree. So for example, having a species be flexible with salinity tolerance. So as we kind of go towards reclaimed water, how would a species fare with that? And then also looking at root damage potential. I know that's a big issue for street trees, for example. And then I will just say that we welcomed native tree species as part of this list, but they were not exclusively considered. So we also, the reason for this is that we're focusing on urban areas. And so California's urban areas have just relatively few tree species native within those city boundaries. And this photo on the right shows this research group basically looked at native tree ranges and found that within, for example, in that blue area in the Central Valley area, I think there was something like 4 native trees native to that area. And so we found, or researchers have been finding, that most cities have fewer than 4 native species that aren't already used. And so if we're thinking about how to expand diversity in our canopy, we need to look towards, in addition to native species, to also look for other species that could help fill out that species palette. And then all of this is in that context of climate change and how we're looking at a hotter, likely drier future where some of the native species that could be adapted to urban areas might not do so well. So in our final selection, we ended up with 12 species. That's sort of the capacity that we had, the funding that we had for each climate zone. But there's some overlap across climate zones. And so in total, we had 19 species that were selected. In general, these are species that are native to hotter parts of the world compared to the 3 climate zones that we're looking at. But some California natives are included. So here are the species from Australia. So we have 2 acacias, we have a ghost gum, and then species native to the Southwest US, including California. So we have the Catalina cherry and the island oak are native to California. And then other species that are a little bit more what we might think of as desertish. So the desert willow, the Palo Verde, etc. And then a couple more species from the Oklahoma, Texas, Western US area. So for example, the netleaf hackberry. We have another oak here, Camby's oak. And then just a handful from kind of outside the US. So the 4th step out of this 5-step process was to actually plant the trees. We worked with cities. We worked with the city of Los Angeles, city of Sacramento to help find us parks. So these are urban parks that could accommodate 24 trees. So we have 2 replicates for each species. 4 park sites in each climate zone. And then we also had a reference site in each climate zone. So these were, for the most part, on University of California experimental fields. So these are really uniform soils. There's no potential for vandalism. They're very, we had them irrigated for the first 2 years. So we think of these as like the pampered, the trees that were on the reference sites are sort of the pampered trees. What is the potential for these trees if management is done appropriately? And then that's in contrast to the park sites where we allowed managers to treat the trees as they treat any other other trees that they're managing. So we had the help of local planting groups. They did a series of community planting days. So we had help with the plantings. We planted the trees in 2015 and 16, depending on climate zone. And we've been collecting data every year for the first 5 years, and now we're on a every 2-year cycle. So we go back to the trees, we see what condition they're in, they're alive, dead, the growth. So we're measuring the trunk diameter, the tree height. We look at just the overall structure, what sort of maintenance needs to happen. And then in the first after the initial period, we had 2 years of stem water potential data. So that was looking at tree stress in kind of the hotter parts of the summer. So, and then now coming to the last step, sharing out results. So I do always remind people that this is a 20-year study and we're only about 7 or 8 years in, or 8 or 9 years in. So we have some ways to go to kind of see how these species are doing overall. But this is the preliminary data for Inland Valley's climate zone. So this is the climate zone centered around Sacramento down through the Central Valley. So in general, except for Parkinsonia, the species in the reference sites have equal or better survival than in the park sites. It's sort of intuitive. And many species haven't had any mortality yet. So now I'll just go through just a couple examples. I think I have 10 minutes left here. A couple examples from pictures from the field, and I'll just talk about 5 or so species and cultivars. So the setup for these slides is the same throughout. So on the left, your left side are the reference site photos, and on the right side are the park site photos. So you'll see sometimes a difference in size and condition. So one of the species that hasn't had any mortality yet is the Acacia stenophila. That's the shoestring acacia. It's a native to Australia. It's got these very long, kind of droopy leaves. It's got small yellow flowers, clusters of these brown seed pods. So this has been surviving very well and growing very well. However, we are seeing some root suckers that have come out in a couple of the different park sites. So this is one that we're continuing to monitor, and because of this reason, we probably wouldn't be recommending it. Another species that's been doing well in the sense that it hasn't had any mortality, and it's been growing very well, is the Quercus cambii. That's the Camby's oak. It's native to Texas and Mexico. It's a very drought tolerant red oak species. It's got these slender, glossy leaves and attracts birds and squirrels. Next, we have the Prosopis glandulosa maverick. This is a grafted thornless cultivar of the Texas honey mesquite. It's a deciduous tree with lacy, bright green foliage and smooth gray bark. So thus far, all of these have stayed alive, but they're in varying conditions, as you can see from the photos here, particularly in the park sites. And then it has this kind of naturally open stem structure, which has led to some of the kind of stems breaking off. And so what we've seen being done in some of the park sites is the managers are sort of tying them together or pruning early on to help with the structure there. Next, we have the desert willow bubba. This is a more upright, less shrubby version of desert willow. It originates in Texas. And this is actually one of my favorites just because of the beautiful flowers, very fragrant pink flowers. And then all of these have remained alive in the reference sites, but it has had a couple of losses in the park sites. And then similarly with this Osage orange, has had no mortality in the reference sites, but some losses in the park sites. And the other issue we're seeing is that sometimes it has these rootstock suckers that are thorny because of the grafting. This one we haven't had as much luck with in the northern climate zone here. This is the rosewood. It's doing actually well in Southern California. We think, and we've started to monitor this, but we think that it has some issues with very cold evenings or nights in the winter. And so we're starting to track that throughout the year. And then I think this is one of my last ones. This is the Parkinsonia Desert Museum. While it's beautiful, this is one of my favorites as well, as far as every time we go out, there's tons of bees in the canopy. It has this structure that's very prone to breaking from, especially in the northern reference site at UC Davis, have these strong wind events, and it hasn't been able to withstand those. And then lastly, just an example here, we have the ghost gum. This is a species that's had some mortality in both the reference sites and the park sites. But those that have survived past this establishment period seem to be doing pretty well. So coming towards the end here, one of the things I wanted to mention is that this whole idea of climate ready trees, that's one side to the story, but it's not enough to sort of pin everything on, well, this species should be able to adapt to the climate. There's also the need for maintenance and the need for, these are still trees planted in urbanized systems. And so depending on the objective, so depending on whether you want it as a street tree or maybe a backyard tree, or you're okay with having it in a park, it'll have different needs. And so we need to kind of work with the species. And I think studies like this will help to kind of show what the natural structure is. Is it going to require pruning? So these are things that we've been keeping track of. And so in addition to, we have a website that I wanted to point you towards, where we'll have periodic updates. And there's a whole list of species is on there with photos and such things. So thank you to, these are all of our collaborators, especially to Mountain States Wholesale Nursery, who donated most of these trees, and all of our different funding sources. And thank you to all of you for listening to this talk.
All right, we've got a couple minutes for questions available. I think
the mortality issues that you had tied to some of those trees, outside of the structural issues, is it mostly irrigation?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't track the irrigation. So in the reference sites, we had 2 years of irrigation based on the evapotranspiration rates, and then water was cut off. So the idea is to just have them be reliant on natural rainfall. So for those we don't know. It could be drought stress. Yeah, unfortunately, with as you probably know, with trees, it's often just a spiraling circle of different things could be happening with the tree, and we don't know what the main cause was. There could be multiple factors. Yeah, we are keeping track of pests and pathogens. Haven't seen any on any of the species. In the park sites, there have been a couple of issues. I'm not sure if I would call it vandalism, but yeah, structural issues and weed whacker damage. Had a couple of those. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any, one last question for that one? All right, we'll have one last quick question and then we'll have to.
Great. I thought maybe Loren meant drowning in the parks because of the irrigation.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Laguna Creek Park, I believe is the name in Sacramento. Ironic, this is a drought tolerance study, and one time when we were out there, the lawn was completely flooded. And so since then, the manager has changed for that site. So, and that's the other kind of tricky thing in the park sites is that there's this constant rotation of managers and they have different styles. And so that has never happened again, but there was clearly one summer when we were out there where there was flooding. So, and we didn't particularly see, there wasn't a mortality event directly after that. Oh, sorry. But certainly it could have contributed.
Do you know of anybody who's doing studies about species that are moving with the changes in climate? For instance, there's theory that if I say, for instance, choose trees that are more appropriate to inland empire area here on the coast, they might have a better chance. Have you known anybody studying that?
Yeah, there's a paper that came out by Joe McBride from UC Berkeley and Igor Lachin, and I can send it to you, but it basically does that kind of exercise where it looks at for urban areas, which species do exist across California, and kind of looking at the climate tolerances and how they predict into the future, which one of those, based on what climate is predicted for that city, which of those species should be able to survive just based on climate. But yeah, there's a paper out about that.
Thank you so much for being here. And again, she'll be out in the crowd, I hope. So one quick plug before Shelkie does her goodbye. You're welcome. Again, thank you all for being here. I do want to plug the Santa Clara Green Gardeners program. We are Valley Water is a partner that supports that, and they have definitely seen a decline in participation. And to keep that program growing, we'll need more to sign up. So definitely these larger landscape companies, you can send lots of people to them. There's another training coming up in the fall, but I wanted to say that is available. Keep an eye out for it or do a quick look up, but it's a great program, especially to send your crew to.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for attending the 2024 Landscape Summit. We hope you all enjoy the event. Please remember to complete the feedback survey that will be sent out by email. We want to hear what you thought about the summit. Also, if you would like to join the Valley Water Landscape Committee, you can do so in the survey. Or if you are here in person, there is a sign-up sheet by the registration table. For virtual attendees, thank you again, and have a good rest of your day.